Alright, well what this will be is a little practice test using the Aleks software, but I was able to get it printed on a piece of paper, and it's a PDF file. Yours, of course, will be online. But they're asking us to start, and what I'm going to suggest here is that you, in your homework log or wherever you're going to keep this, is pause, in a sense, write down the question and work it, and then I'll work it as well. Now, part of this is to follow what they're asking, the instructions. The sum of 9 times a number and 4 equals 8. So over here, you want to write that answer, and they're asking you to use the letter Y. So we would write 9 times Y. 9 times the number, the unknown number is Y, and indicates addition, equals 8. Alright, we'll leave that up because we have room. Now, they want us to solve this equation. So again, on your blue sheet, if you're doing a test or in your notebook, you're going to write 9 equals U plus 5. And you'd want to label this as number 1, and this is number 2. I'm going to give you a blue sheet that's divided so it's easy to find your work. So we want to isolate the U. So one way to do it, and again, you could transpose, but we're going to subtract 5 here. Subtract 5 there. What we're doing to one side, we do to the other, and we end up with U equals a negative 14. So I can see they're starting us off pretty easy. All right, for number 3. A negative 5x equals 10 thirds. Now, this could be a little tricky, but if you recall, we said whenever there's fractions, multiply every term by the lowest common denominator. And here, this is one term, this is one term. Our lowest common denominator happens to be 3. So we'll multiply both sides by 3. Now here, the 3's cancel out. And you're left with a negative 15x, just multiplying this, equals 10. Now, there are no fractions, so to get rid of the term, or the part of the term that's with the x, we call that the numerical coefficient, we divide by this. Now notice it's negative, so you have to use a negative 15. And then this all cancels out, becomes a 1. Anything divided by itself is a 1, so that gives us x. Now we know this division here is going to give us a negative. A positive divided by a negative gives you a negative, and we can take a 5 out of each one of those. So this is a negative 2 thirds. And again, this is the work to support your answer. And again, pause it to write something down. All right, again, pause it. I have written this one carefully here, and this is number 4. And as I look at it, it definitely has fractions. I want to find what is my least common denominator between a 3, a 2, and a 9. Think about it. And if you said 18, that is correct. Now, 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 18 6 times. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 18 9 times. 9 goes into 9 once. 9 goes into 18 twice. So our next step is a negative 6 times 1 is a negative 6. A negative 9 times 3 is a negative 27u equals 2 times 5 is 10. We want to get all our letters on one side, all of our numbers on the other. So I'm going to transpose this negative 6, or add 6, bringing it to the other side makes it a positive 6. So this becomes 16, negative 27u. Now what I'm going to do is divide both sides by the coefficient of u, which is a negative 27. And that's about as far as I can go. So u equals a negative, put the negative in the middle there, 16/27. All right, if you have time to copy this down, again it has fractions. Get rid of the fractions by multiplying each term by the lowest common denominator, which is a 4 here. And this is number 5. Okay. Give you some time. So now we do our canceling. 4 goes into 4 once, so these just cancel off, and I end up with a y here. 4 times 8 is 32, and 4 times 27 is 108. Now again, I can subtract 32 here, subtract 32, or take this positive 32, transpose it to the other side where it becomes a negative 32, and this then gives me, this is gone now, y equals 76. Okay, now again we're trying to model by showing you the steps in a clear, orderly way. I probably should have written this again here, but hopefully you have room on your paper to do so. I moved it up, and again, pause, and I've written out 3 of them to save a little time. And as we look at number 6, what do we do first? Well, there are no fractions, so then we get rid of grouping symbols. So we're going to distribute that, and we get 8y minus 2 times 9 is 18 equals 14. Now we're going to transpose the negative 18. On this side it becomes a positive 18, or you're just adding 18 to both sides, and you get 8y now equals 32. Divide both sides by 8, we get y equals 4. Now you might note I didn't show the division here. And, normally there are steps you can take shortcuts. Okay, now I'm going to erase this because it's going to interfere a little bit with my next step, so we'll just erase that one. But you can always go back. Now, for number 7, there are fractions, and there's 3 terms. What's my least common denominator? And I just give you a moment to think about that. Now, 5 times 7 here is 35, but 2 doesn't go into 35. But if we multiply 35 by 2, we get a 70, and then each of these go into 70. So our lowest common denominator there is a 70. So I have to multiply everything by 70. And you want to pick a denominator that the denominator will cancel out with what you're multiplying each term by. You're making this equation equivalent. It's going to be different. You're making it bigger. But again, with this multiplication that we do here after we divide, we can have fractions that are, well, denominators that are just a 1. No fractions. So 7 will go into there once. 7 will go into there 10 times. 5 will go into there once. 5 will go into there 12 times. How about 14 times? Yes. 5 times 10 is 50, and 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, that's better. And 2 goes into there once. 2 goes into there 35 times. So I now have a new equation. Negative 2 times 10 is a negative 20 equals 6 times 14. So this is a 84x, 14 times 6, x. And then this is just a negative 35. So if we transpose a negative 35 to this side, it becomes a positive 35. And a negative 20 gives me a 15 equals 84x. I'm going to divide both sides by 84. So x equals this. But notice, and let me review this with you. We call it the rule of threes. If we add up the digits in a number, this is a 6, and this adds up to a 12. And both of these are divisible by 3. So looking at something, this is divisible by 3. So let me erase this part here. 3 will go into 15 5 times, and 3 will go into 84 28 times. So our final answer then is x equals 5/28. Now if you put this in there, they'll count it incorrect. But when I look at your work and see that you've done all this, you just didn't simplify it, I give you lots of partial credit. All right, let's clear this up here a little bit. Going on to number 8. Now hopefully you've copied it down. The question would be, how many terms are there? Well, because of this division bar, all of this is one term, and this is one term. So there's just 2 terms. What's my lowest common denominator? And I can put this in parentheses here. And the answer is a negative 3. So here, multiplying this by a negative 3, the negative 3's just cancel out, and on this side we're left with 5x minus 19 equals a negative, no, negative times negative will make it a positive 21. So I'm going to add, I'll do it the other way too so you can see it, add 20, I'm sorry, add 19, I'm thinking of what's coming up here, add 19, add 19, so we get 5x then equals 40, and divide both sides by 5, x equals 8. So again, the process of transposing a negative 19 on this side becomes a positive 19. Taking a term from one side, moving it to the other. And in essence, what you're doing is you're adding a positive 19 to both sides. Alright, take a moment, copy number 9. And as we look at it, there's 4 terms. Our common denominator, this one's a little easy, is going to be 15. So 3 goes into there once, 3 goes into there 5 times. 5 once, 5 goes into there 3 times. 5 once, 3 times. Nothing there. So we have negative 5 times 4w is a negative 20w. 3 times 6 is 18. Negative 3 times 6 is a negative 18w. And this is a negative 45. Never hurts to check your work here. Yeah, that looks good. Now we want to try to keep our w's positive if we can. So I'm going to transpose this. And here it becomes a positive 20w, so this is a 2w. I'm going to transpose this, so here it becomes a positive, or yes, positive 45. And this becomes a 63, and we divide both sides by 2, and here the 2's cancel out, and we get w equals this. Now notice 2 doesn't go in there, so you could leave it as an improper fraction. Okay, for number 10 we have to read it carefully. There were this many tickets sold for a school play. They were either adult tickets or student tickets. The number of student tickets sold was 3 times the number of adult tickets sold. How many adult tickets were sold? So, student tickets was 3 times the adult tickets. So we don't know the number of adult tickets sold. So we're going to say the adult tickets sold were A. A for adult tickets. This stands for a number. Could be 50 or 60 or whatever. Now, we know the student tickets sold was 3 times the adult tickets sold. So plus 3A. And we know the total tickets sold was 360. So this one was rather easy, but it does take time to check it out. So we're going to group like terms. Remember, there's a 1 in front of there. We don't write it. 4a, and this is number 10, equals 360. Divide both sides by 4. A equals 90. So the number of adult tickets, because that's what we said A was, is 90 tickets. Okay, let's clear this, raise it up actually, and then set this up, copy it, so we'll solve it in our next step. Now, one of the first things you should always do after you copy something on your blue sheet is, did you copy it correctly? And check that. Okay. Then you study and say, oh, it's an equation with fractions. So I have to multiply every term by the least common denominator. You have a 2 and you have an 8. And you might say, well, it's 16. No, it's 8. 8 would be the least. So because of the grouping symbol, this division bar, this is just one term. This is one term. And again, this is one term. And we're going to multiply each by 8. Got carried away there. There, that's better. So here are the 2's. 2 goes into there once, into there 4 times. Here we don't have anything, but this is nice. They just cancel out completely. But we have a negative sign in front of that parentheses now. So we have to distribute. 4 times u is 4u. And don't forget you have to do the second one also. That'll be a negative 4. This is a 48 here. Now this is the tricky part. You have a negative sign in front of a parenthesis now. So you have to change each of these signs. This becomes a negative 7u. And this becomes a negative 8. All right. That was a little tricky. That's why grouping symbols are important in doing something like this. Now we're going to combine like terms. We get 4u minus 4. I'm going to subtract 8 from this, and I'm going to have negative 7u. Subtracting 8 from this leaves me with a plus 40. So I've set it up with a variable term, a constant, a variable term, a constant. Now I want all my variables to be positive if I can. So I'm going to add 7 here, or transpose that, and this gives me 11u. I'm going to transpose this. On this side it becomes a positive 4, or add 4. Add 4, this is 44. I'm going to divide both sides now by 11, and I get u equals 4, for number 11, and that checks. Okay, we can leave that there for a moment. Again, you're pausing as needed and going back. I apologize for that little misstep up there. Check your work. It says, last week Dave drove this many miles. This week he drove this many miles. Using B, write an expression for the total number of miles he drove in 2 weeks. Well, that's pretty straightforward. He drove 271 in that first week. And in the second week, he drove this many miles. And that's the answer. So it's nice to have something easy. It's not an equation. And, if it equaled a total number, then that would be something else. But that's what we have so far. Now, in number 13, There's a couple of ways to look at it, but you have to read it first. The price of an item was reduced by 45%. The original price was 60%. So what is the price of the item now? Well, you could take 45% of this and then subtract it. Or a shortcut would be you're paying, if you're getting a 45% discount, you're paying 55% of 60 will give you your new price. Again, the other way would have been take 45% of 60, then subtract it from 60, or you realize that your new price, or the sales price, will be, with a 45% discount, is 55%. Put that in your calculator, and you get N equals $33. Alright, Felipe needs to make this many deliveries this week. So far, he has completed 19 of them. What percentage of his total deliveries has Felipe completed? Well, we find percentage by putting the portion that was completed, 19, over the total, 25. Put that into our calculator, and we get 0.76. But that's a decimal fraction. We convert a decimal fraction to a percentage by moving the decimal point over 2 places and adding a percent sign. So our answer is 76%. Alright, number 15. What percent of 60 is 57? Well, again, the work would be 57 over 60. Put that in your calculator, and it gives you 0.95. But again, they don't want a decimal, they want a percentage. So you have to move the percent over, or the decimal over, to make it a percent. Now, letter B. What number is 15% of 80? So, let's just set this up as an equation. 15% of 80 is N, or P, or whatever letter you want to use. Well, when you do that, put 0.15 times 80, you get 12. Alright, these are some easy ones, just taking your time to understand what's going on here. Alright, let's raise it up a little. Alright, for number 16, a tortoise is walking in the desert. He walks for this many meters at a speed of 5 meters per minute. How many minutes does he walk, or does it walk? Well, here we're using the formula distance equals rate times time, and we know the distance is 6.25. We know the rate is 5, and the minutes is t for time. So if we divide both sides by 5, this ends up as t equals 1.25 minutes. Now, pause and think about these as much as needed. I don't want to, I would have to think about it a little bit too. All right, Mary has 4 scores on 4 tests. What does she need on her next test so that the average or mean is 77? Well, what you do to set this up is you go 79 plus 66 plus 81 plus 93. And what does she need on that last test? Well, we don't know. So we'll say plus x, so that her average is 77. Now the question is, first of all, is this an equation? No. Because in order to find out what this average is, we have to divide this side by the number of tests taken. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the equation. So this then represents an average, and we want this to be an average, where this number here is unknown. So what do we do? Well, keeping in mind that this is a fraction, we're going to multiply, and this is just a 7 here, both sides by 5. So here the 5's cancel out. And now I have to add these up, subtract this from this total once we do the multiplication, and then that would be what we needed on our last test. All right, so let's pause it and do some work here. Now, again, these cancel out. I added this up and I got 319 plus x. And then by timing 77 by 5, this gives me an average of 77 once I divide 385 by 5. But the total of 5 tests at each 77 gives us this. So now I subtract the 319 from 385 and I get 66. So that should be rather easy to do. It's been doing pretty well. Let's get a 77. 77 is usually considered a C+. I would shoot for perhaps a little higher than that. Okay. Write inequalities to represent the situation below. And again, you've paused it, and you're going to think of, how do I write an inequality here? All right. To get a 10% discount, a shopper must spend no less than $100. Use D to represent spending in dollars. So D would be the amount of money we have to spend, no less than. So D would have to be greater or equal to 100. All right. Again, you had to think about that and which inequality sign. And I believe they talk about no less than equates to greater than or equal to. At the airport, each piece of luggage to be checked in must weigh at most 55 pounds. So here, W has to be less than or equal to 55. All right. Again, it took some thinking about what inequality sign are you going to use. All right, let's go on. For this next one, they're asking us to graph on this number line. And this is in set builder notation. So we know a -7 is there. So we're going to put a parenthesis at -7. And it's less than -4. So a parenthesis there. And we fill that in. Now, I believe, though, in your case, they'll want you to use the hollows, which you are allowed to put in there. The hollows are for the parenthesis. Another way of doing it would have been brackets, would have been a solid dot if it were also equal to, but that's not what it is. So this is the answer. And then write in interval notation. So it'll be parenthesis, -7, comma, -4, parenthesis. Okay? All right, one more to do and we're finished. Now, for number 20 here, we've copied it down. It's with fractions. What's our lowest common denominator? Well, it would be 30. So this is 30W. 6 goes into there once. This is 5. Plus 5 is greater than or equal to, 5 goes into there once, 5 goes into there 6 times, a -18. We're going to transpose the +5 to the other side where it becomes a -5, so this is -23. Now divide both sides by 30. W is greater than or equal to a -23/30. Now, I know you're wondering, should I have changed the direction of our inequality sign? And the answer is no. You only do that if you were to divide by a negative or multiply something by a negative. In order to keep it correct, you have to reverse the sign. But not here, because we're dividing by a positive. Okay, this was just under 38 minutes or so. Hopefully it's helpful.